The fact that you are here right now, that you exist, means you've beat astronomical odds against you. The odds that you would even be born, that you would exist. Because let's lay it out. Your parents have to get together for you to exist, but then their parents on both sides have to get together, and now you're involving four different people, and then you just keep going back and back, and it gets exponentially more and more and more. The odds become less and less. And if any one person didn't meet or didn't come together or all these things that didn't take place, you would not exist. It seems absolutely crazy then when you look at it in that mathematical way that we're here right now. I think about that in my own situation. So my grandparents on my dad's side immigrated from Ireland, like so many of us that have people that have come from other countries, our grandparents, our parents, our great-grandparents. And so in the 1950s, my grandparents came over from Ireland and ended up meeting in Chicago and coming together, getting married and having my dad, and then my dad meeting my mom, and then having myself and my 7 brothers and sisters. And now, in a really beautiful way, the next generation in my family is coming along. My mom now, my parents have 5 grandchildren, and we just see this moving on and on as the generations progress. But the odds are stacked against us. It seems just like absolute chance that any of this took place. It seems oftentimes in life there's a lot of moments where it just seems like chance. Like it doesn't seem to make sense, and it seems like it's all random. And we can get this way when we think we come up with difficulties in life, or we look back and say like, wow, imagine the chance of these things happening, good and bad. But I want to remind us as Christians, as Catholics, we don't believe in coincidences. We don't believe in chance. Rather, everything takes place in the providence of God. St. Thomas Aquinas says in the Summa Theologica, all things are subject to divine providence. All things. It's the first day of the week. The 2 disciples are walking away from Jerusalem to Emmaus on the road. And as they're walking along, they're discussing all the things that have taken place these last couple of days. This person whom they've given their life to, that they followed for the last 3 years, has been killed. And he's been laid in a tomb. And they're walking along and they start talking about how, but then there's other people, some of the other followers, saying that he's been raised from the dead. But they still don't quite believe. And they're still walking the wrong way. They're walking away from Jerusalem. They're walking away from Jesus. They're walking away from everything. And then, by chance, from their perspective, it just happened that this other traveler draws up alongside them. And they don't know who he is. But he starts breaking open the scriptures for them. And their hearts are filled on fire for what's taking place. And he shows all through the Old Testament how it all points to this Jesus whom they have been following, but seems as if it's all over. They get to their destination, get to the house, and they invite this stranger to stay with them. And it seems like such a chance, such a coincidence that all this has taken place. And he takes bread, he breaks it, and at that their eyes were open and they realized this is Jesus. And he disappeared from their sight, and they got up and they ran. They ran back to Jerusalem, back towards Jesus, back towards the mission to which they were on. From these 2 disciples' perspective, everything was just chance, that this man Jesus just happened to be walking along. But when we look at it from the perspective of God, from the perspective of Jesus, we see it's not chance. We see this was all divine providence, that this was all meant to be, that it was meant to be that Jesus grew up alongside him. It was meant to be that they were talking about it so Jesus could break open the word, break open the scriptures, and eventually their eyes will be opened in the breaking of the bread. As I said, nothing is coincidences. Nothing is by chance, but everything is within the providence of God. And that's the key for us this Sunday, this weekend, because we have to look at the world through the eyes of Jesus, through the eyes of God, through the eyes of divine providence. And God has 2 wills, if we want to look at it that way. He has his active will and his passive will, because everything takes place within the will, the permission of God. And so his active will is where he's actively working in the world, where he's actively helping us along the way. We look at that road to Emmaus. That is his active will, that Jesus walks along and he's actively doing that. But then his passive will, those moments maybe where it just seems like coincidence, those moments of struggle, those moments of hurt, those moments in which sin comes into the world, that passive will has to exist because of your and my free will. That we can choose something other than Jesus. We can choose something that's not good. And God, in his benevolence and his goodness, has given us our free will to choose. Because we're not slaves to God, but rather we're his children. And just like you can't force your own children, especially your adult children, to do what it is that you want them to do, you might try sometimes, that they choose. And it's the same for us. So everything takes place within divine providence. Everything takes place within God's will, either his active will or his passive will. In other words, there's no such thing as chance. My grandparents, who came from Ireland, both came from County Mayo. They both grew up about 10 miles apart from each other in County Mayo and never met until they came to the city of Chicago. My grandpa came over to make money. He was working in the coal mines and eventually as a laborer in the city of Chicago. And my grandma, my Nana, came over. I was only going to stay a couple of years with the family, but because of some other circumstances that happened, she ended up staying longer. She ended up staying here. And they met in the dance halls in the city of Chicago, the Irish dance halls. And they fell in love and got married. These two people that lived 10 miles apart from each other in Ireland met in one of the biggest cities in the world. And you could look at it and say, it's all chance. But I don't believe so. Rather, it was divine providence. It was God's will. It was God's will that they should meet, that they should get married, that they should have my father and my aunt, that the family continues on because of God's divine will, because of what he has did in their life. And so that's my invitation and my challenge to all of us, is sometimes we can look at our life as random, as just chances, as things that really don't make sense or connected, but it's all connected in God's will, that he is walking with us as he walked with the disciples on the road to Emmaus. Even if it didn't quite make sense to them, they didn't quite understand all that was going on, they thought it was just by chance that this man drew up alongside him. But from God's perspective, he is always, always walking with you. God bless.